Hi guys, welcome back to exmolex. Today we're going to talk about Mormon apostle David Allen Bednar, better known in some circles as Susan Bednar's husband. Someone on TikTok recently posted a story time about him. I believe her name was Sarah. I'll put her on the screen. I mean, TikTok is going away for Americans, so it'll probably disappear, but this is where I found the video. Anyway, this girl tells the story of what happened during this devotional that David Bednar was presiding at. And there was all kinds of weird stuff that he did during this, like being kind of demeaning towards his wife, talking over her, taking the microphone away from her. They were like both there doing a Q&A, but he would like barely let her get a word in. There was also some really weird stuff about the way that he interacted with the audience. For example, in the LDS church, it's customary that when a high authority in the church, like a prophet or an apostle, enters the room, you stand and you remain standing until they take a seat. It's like a respect thing. But he really took it a step too far at a point where the congregation was going to sing a hymn. And Bednar said, like, this is gonna be like, you're gonna feel the spirit in like a certain specific way, like I prophesy of it or whatever. And so they start singing and they get like one verse in and he pops up out of his chair and goes to the podium and stops everybody and says basically like, you all look miserable. You need to smile more, like brighten up the room a little bit. And so some people take this really seriously because this is an apostle, right? Like they believe that this man communicates with God directly for them. So they're like, okay, so people decide they're gonna stand up to bring more energy into the song. And this girl that was telling the story is like, he like almost levitates out of his chair. He pops up so fast and runs to the podium and basically lectures people about how like you need to take your cue of whether to be standing or sitting from him. Like he's sitting down, you cannot possibly be standing up in this room while I am sitting down to sing. You can't stand. And apparently people in the crowd were very like embarrassed, and like you could tell from their faces they felt really bad, like they were getting a lecture from this general authority and they had been trying to do the right thing, and then he made them feel bad about it. And this was also fascinating to me. I don't really have any experience with David Bednar other than, you know, seeing him give talks in general conference during the time that I was a Mormon, and he seemed kind of boring. I didn't really have like any particular feelings about him, but watching that video I was like, wow, like he sounds crazy. And so I started reading the comments and realized that a lot of people have similar experiences with him, and this is very much like normal for him. So I reached out to my audience and said, email me or leave a comment or DM me if you have any experiences with David Bednar, and I want to make a video about it. So that's what today's video is going to be. And you guys really came through. I was absolutely shocked by the amount of messages that I got and how long some of the stories are. Like, I've got paragraphs and paragraphs to go through, so there actually might be 2 parts to this depending on how quickly I can get through the stories. I just want to share this video because as somebody who grew up in the church, I very much viewed the prophet and the 12 apostles as almost all-knowing, not quite because they're not God, but very important to us as lay members of the church. They were the people who were communicating with God, who make all the decisions for the church. Everything the church does passes through them. The prophet himself is God's mouthpiece, and the apostles are there to back him up. I mean, we held them in such high regard. We had so much respect for them. We would listen to their talks and do whatever it was that they said because they had authority. They had these special priesthood keys from God to tell us what we should be doing. So hearing about them more personally, since obviously I've never met them, but hearing from people who have and seeing the kind of people they are when you actually get to know them or meet them is very interesting. So without further ado, let's get started. And I want to start with some of the comments that I saw on Sarah's video. I was a Temple Square missionary and was warned before meeting Bednar that he was not very kind. Quote, not very kind. Dude has a reputation. When Bednar was at BYUI, I asked him a question about curfew rules in a housing management Q&A. He told me to sit down and be quiet. He wouldn't answer my question. Lost all respect for him after that. I've even seen active believing members say they don't like Elder Bednar. A lot of people refer to him as Susan Bednar's husband because of his blatant disrespect to his wife. No longer religious, but I was deeply so when he was called as an apostle. That was the first time the Spirit told me this was not an inspired call for a general authority, and that freaked me out deeply as a true believing Mormon. When I was 18, I went to a similar Q&A devotional with Bednar and his wife. I don't exactly remember, but one one question was about dating and marriage. Elder Bednar took the mic, and I remember two things. One, he emphasized that his wife is not conventionally attractive and is not traditionally beautiful, and left it at that. He didn't say that she is beautiful to him or anything, just left it. Two, he told us that when they began dating, they didn't like each other very much, but just kept dating until they felt it was right. I have always remembered those and thought it was weird. His wife, Susan, gave a heartbreaking talk about how she was harassed while wearing a turtleneck sweater. She said she deserved it because her sweater was too tight, not that the men shouldn't have harassed her. That is so sad, and I'm sure that he probably encouraged that line of thinking for her. Okay, now I'm gonna jump to some of the ones that you guys have sent to me. He visited my mission just before I arrived, so I didn't meet him. But every missionary I talked to about his little mission conference said he was not as nice as he seemed, and that he was pretty mean and self-important in person. I'm Latina. He came to our ward several times, and each time gave me the sensation that he felt we were beneath him. And I wasn't the only one who felt that way. His speeches always seemed to come from a place of entitlement and grandiosity. His vibe was cold, calculating, and conceited. Met him in 2010, I believe, when he came out to speak to missionaries in the Oregon Eugene mission. Was sitting in the car. We drove missionaries there from Southern Oregon. He passed by our car and asked if we were going to sit in our car the whole time. We said yes, because we don't have anywhere to go and don't want to get lost. He told us to come in. His 2-hour speech to the missionaries was about how important baptizing people is and getting people to the temple is, and those are the hallmarks of being a successful missionary. When missionaries don't accomplish those things, it is evident they are lacking obedience to God and the Holy Spirit. Didn't know what to think about that. I know what to think about that. I think that he's an asshole. Shook his hand once at a youth conference. At the time, I was blown away by the experience. He had just prophesied, his word, that there were people in the room who would be present for the second coming. Minneapolis, somewhere between 2006 and 2008. Yeah, I'm actually not surprised by that at all, because that has been said over the decades by many a different apostle, like, oh, so-and-so or this person or whatever will be alive. I've also heard many different times about patriarchal blessings that say specifically that that person will be alive for the second coming and then they die. And usually the like workaround for that is like, well, they'll be resurrected, so they'll be alive. And I'm just like, what a cop-out. I grew up in Bountiful, Utah, and went to junior high with one of his granddaughters. She played basketball and we were in a pageant together, the DYW, Distinguished Young Women. Bednar was in the audience at many of our school's basketball games and also for the pageant. The first time I met him was at a basketball game. I went over with some friends to shake his hand. I remember being surprised that his fingers were so long, his hands so cold, and his demeanor so unkind, and his eyes so dark and hollow looking, even though he wore a smile and seemed to like the attention. I was a Molly Mormon at the time and had no reason to question the church or the validity of the apostles, so that interaction really shocked me and seemed so weird. I never tried to shake his hand again because it felt so wrong. Not a personal experience, however, a friend of mine served a mission under him. Said when he met him, which was on multiple occasions, he was never very nice and was always cold and very non-receptive to missionaries' questions, comments, or concerns. He spoke at my mission 10 years ago, and a few things stood out to me. I noticed that he never used the hymn book when singing, and during his talk, he bragged that he had memorized them. He said that women will get things right 9 out of 10 times and still feel down about themselves. Men get 1 out of 10 things right and feel way too good about themselves. I won't try to compare the struggles men face to the large amounts of misogyny women deal with in the church, but as a man, this comment didn't sit right with me. I've always struggled with self-esteem issues, and I'm often overly critical towards myself. It just came off as insensitive. Told us that praying for people who aren't at church isn't enough, and that everyone should go to their homes after church and ask them why they didn't attend, encouraging a total lack of boundaries. During a Q&A, someone asked him what kind of role his wife and kids played in his apostolic calling, and his response was something to the effect of, "They act as a mirror reflecting the progress I've made. Sometimes I think the stuff I know is common knowledge, but they remind me that it isn't." He really strikes me as an incredibly arrogant man, and I know that I'm not alone in that. Edit. Something I forgot to mention. Prior to him speaking, he gave us reading material so we could discuss what we had learned. All of the reading material was his conference talks. Oh, okay. Elder Bednar visited my true believing parents' stake about 10 years ago. Their good true believing friend in their ward, let's call him Steve, spent the whole day with him while he was there because he was retired law enforcement, so he was assigned to be part of the Bednar entourage and be with him to escort him around while he was there since he could provide some security being retired law enforcement. Steve told me that Elder Bednar is an apostle of the Lord and he is also an asshole. I never met the man personally, but Bednar was the president of Ricks College, now BYU, Idaho, when I was dating my wife. She was attending Ricks while I was attending BYU. We went on a date to an on-campus performance of the musical 1776. This musical has a few mild swear words in it. For example, a line where John Adams says, "Good God, man, what in the hell are you waiting for?" So pretty low level as far as swear words go, and it's not very frequent. It happened that President Bednar and his wife were attending the performance the same night we were. They were not sitting near us, but we still saw this happen. About maybe only a half hour into the performance, after one of the above-mentioned lines containing a mild swear word, Bednar and his wife stood up and walked out of the theater. This was pretty emblematic of him and his presidency. He was, and I expect still is, an extreme prude, even by Mormon standards. Okay, there's a couple more that I want to share, but they are very long. So I'm going to stop here for now, and then I will share them in a part 2. If anybody else has David Bednar stories, please send me an email to exmolex@gmail.com. I also feel like I have to mention to you guys that with the TikTok ban looming, it's looking more and more likely that I'm going to lose my platform there. And I'm not gonna lie, I'm pretty sad about it. I've been building a community on that app for about 4 years now, and I had made it to almost 250,000 subscribers. I was pretty proud of it. I've done several different interviews for different newspapers and magazines that came about directly because of TikTok. And while I still have a platform here, and I'm very grateful for that, and I will continue posting more long form content here, it was really nice to have an app that could push my videos out to a wider audience, people that have never heard of Mormonism, people that have never considered Mormonism, and many people who in fact were Mormon who saw my content there and ended up leaving the church. And that's not to mention the fact that at least a little part of my income comes from TikTok, and losing that every month is coinciding with some of my life expenses going up, and that's very frustrating to say the least. But I just want to say thank you to everybody who followed me over to TikTok and helped me build a platform there. I feel like I was able to make a difference in the world that I never thought would be possible using that platform. So thank you for following me there. Thank you if you follow me here. And if you want to help me out so I can continue making this content, leave a like, a comment, subscribe to the channel, maybe share the video somewhere else. That would mean a whole lot to me. Thank you so much for watching. Special thank you to my patrons for supporting the channel. I appreciate you all more than you know. Extra special thank you to Doug Davis for supporting at the Demon tier on my Patreon. If you guys would also like to help support the channel and the work that I do here, there are links to do so in the description below. Thank you so much for being here, and I will see you again with part 2. Bye!